All right, so Grant made a video a couple of days ago. No, actually, literally yesterday, called The Next Major RTS Will Fail, and This Is Why. I think a lot of people had this video in their recommended page, because it's got a lot of views in a very short amount of time, which is awesome. Anyways, I haven't seen this yet. So I already kind of disagree with the title of the video, though. The Next Major RTS Will Fail, This Is Why. I mean, it sounds very clickbaity. But maybe you should put, like, gone sexual between, like, brackets or something, you know? Anyway.
Real-time strategy just isn't popular anymore. Players much prefer MOBAs, shooters, and Battle Royale. And developers will never invest in making one. There's no way to monetize it. No loot boxes or season passes. When a new title releases, it comes and goes with little fanfare. The player base dissipates in a few months, it can't sustain competitive ladder, and the game dies. RTS is a relic of gaming's past. As a content creator, I hear people say these things a lot.
Okay, I was going to say, that's pretty much a reference, right? I don't think that's actually what Grant thinks. I hear the same thing all the time, dude. There's a lot of people saying that exact thing to me. It's like, Lowko, why would anyone play an RTS game? It's boring, it's hard, everyone sucks, can't monetize it properly. I like playing them, dude. And there's a lot of people with me that like playing them as well. But
of RTS. And honestly, I think they're full of it. People love to call doom and gloom. It's an easy alternative to critical thinking and analysis. People who remember the good old days of sitting on the gilded throne as the king of esports, declaring that all is lost and the world has left them behind. While I disagree on their diagnosis why, they are correct about one thing. New RTS releases have been consistently bombing. I'm going to argue that the core problem with RTS right now stems not from the players, but from the developers. There's been a fundamental design philosophy shift for RTS. Developers and publishers have lost vision on what makes these games so much fun to play. And if they don't change course, they are destined to a fate of mediocrity at best.
Okay. So, in general, the RTS that I've played over the last couple of years, some of them have been pretty decent, but the vast majority of them kind of suck. Like, for example, I played Age of Empires 4 for like 2 months, and then I went back to StarCraft 2, and StarCraft 2 felt like a game that came out like yesterday. Like, it felt like Age of Empires was the game that came out like a decade ago, and StarCraft 2 was the new one, if that made any sense. The one thing that, for example, bothered me a lot in AoE 4 is just like the way things feel when you like give a command to a unit. In StarCraft 2, for example, which in my opinion is the best RTS game, the units actually listen to you what you want them to do. And this is something that Blizzard has always been really good at. You can criticize Blizzard for many things, but their games feel really good. Like, as far as responsiveness and reactiveness goes. Yeah, like, things just don't listen to what you want them to do in most RTS games. Either that, or they do so really slowly. Like, it kind of feels in, for example, in AoE 4, I know they've made a lot of improvements to it, so maybe it's better now, but at least in AoE 4, it kind of feels like you're, like, walking through like really thick mud, you know? You like kind of lift up your feet, but everything is like really tiresome. And StarCraft 1 pathing is, yeah, it reminds me a lot, honestly, of AoE 4 pathing as well. Like, things just don't feel as crisp as they should, but yeah.
They're targeting the wrong audience, not focusing on the correct content, and fundamentally misunderstanding who the average RTS player is. And if this doesn't get discussed, it will continue to happen again and again. But why am I qualified to talk about this? In addition to the basic facts that I've played RTS for over 20 years now, have a career based around RTS, and run a large RTS community, I've also worked as an independent consultant for 2 currently unreleased smaller indie titles. This project work acted as the spark that inspired me to take up this project. Over the last few months, I've been surveying groups of RTS players, ranging from casual to hardcore, and I've received an absurd amount of feedback. The sample size of my data is currently 7,500 responses, an undeniably healthy dataset. Using this data, my experience as a player and as a creator, I'm going to explain why the developers keep missing the mark, what old developers used to do differently, and how they can fix it.
Alright.
But before that, even if a developer makes the perfect game, there has to be people interested in playing it. So how many people are playing RTS right now in March 2022? The answer is way more than you think. Getting user data for games can be pretty difficult, so I'm going to have to focus on what is currently the largest RTS, StarCraft 2. Together, we're going to walk through the steps to reach an approximation of the game's monthly average player base. Unfortunately, Blizzard really hates giving out data about their player counts. Something about WoW's decline being very embarrassing for them to talk about. Thankfully, StarCraft 2 had someone who was the embodiment of passion. And while Blizzard wasn't willing to talk about their numbers, one man was. On November 1st, 2017, Total Biscuit tweeted, "Oh, and by the way, we've seen the numbers. SC2 has a consistent 1."
Thank you, Susu.
0.8 million to 2 million monthly user base the entire year. Co-op is extremely popular. Arcade has received...
So I was there when they shared this information. Yeah, that's information that I heard as well.
And there's a lot more coming. First of all, 2 million monthly users for a 7-year-old game is absurd.
So 2017, believe it or not, is not 3 years ago. Just so you guys know, I know it feels like it's only been 3 years, but it's actually been about 5. I honestly think Blizzard could have easily continued monetizing StarCraft 2. I don't think they ever squeezed, as much as they could have out of StarCraft 2. I'm fairly certain that if they would have continued developing more content for it, they would have at the very least made a small profit, but, at minimum, they would have broke even. The main reason why Blizzard stopped making StarCraft content, from what I've gathered over the last couple of years, is because it isn't a billion-dollar title. So it seems that over the last few years, everything that wasn't a billion-dollar title got scrapped. So over the years, I guess Activision Blizzard King just focused on World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, and Candy Crush. And then maybe a title like Diablo 4 and maybe like an Overwatch 2, right? But the main goal, I guess, wasn't so much that there weren't enough players, or like the main issue wasn't so much that there weren't enough players to continue making content for, but the main problem, I guess, was that they couldn't make $1 billion. So they decided to get rid of it, which is a little bit silly. In hindsight, I think they probably also don't think that was the smartest move, especially considering what has happened to Blizzard over the last couple of years. I mean, a lot of that has nothing to do with the games. Secretly, I'm hoping that like Microsoft can change some of that, because Microsoft historically, at least with the companies that they've bought, have been quite supportive, even if like... Do you really think that StarCraft 2 can't make a profit? Like, say you have like a team of like a dozen people working on StarCraft 2. Now, they're located in Southern California, so that would cost them several million a year in salary and all that, right? Do you really think StarCraft can generate that amount of money? It 100% can. Like, I have no idea about sales numbers for like StarCraft 2 co-op commanders or StarCraft 2 like... sets of skins and all that. But like there's some low-hanging fruit that can 100% turn at the very least break even. And it would have like, there's a lot of value, not just in like making money. So this I think is one of the biggest shifts in gaming over the last couple of years. There's a lot of value in creating loyal customers rather than trying to make a quick buck, right? So like, I feel like years ago, a lot of companies were trying to like create a loyal audience. So like, say for example, a StarCraft 3 would ever come out. A lot of the StarCraft 2 people would be like, oh my god, this is going to be amazing because I still like this game and they've been very supportive of us. So, I'm going to go check it out. These days, it seems like there's less value, according to those companies, in having a loyal, user base, which kind of sucks. But it really shouldn't cost that much, honestly. It really shouldn't, like, at least, obviously millions of dollars is a lot of money for, us people. But for a big company like Activision Blizzard King, that is absolutely nothing.
But that data is over 4 years old now. It's not going to be...
Especially if you get the CEO with such massive, stupid bonuses. Like, anyways, I don't want to get into that again because we've discussed this to death, but like...
Correct for today. But thankfully, we do have some nice numbers of ladder games played both in 2017 and now. We can use that data to extrapolate the average monthly player base for 2022. The 3 seasons for the year of 2017 averaged 150,000, 140,000, and 131,000 games played per day. This makes a yearly average of 140,000. For the full year of 2021, the average was 193.8 thousand, a 38.4% increase in number of ladder games played.
This hurts my feelings.
This growth is almost certainly because the game went free to play in 2017 right after this tweet. Unless something incredible...
that is, by the way... Sorry, I'm forgetting his name real quick. I know that Mr. Tim Morton pushed really hard for StarCraft 2 to go free to play. And eventually it did, which is amazing. Tim Morton doesn't work at Blizzard anymore. He's now at Frost Giant. So he's the founder or the CEO of Frost Giant, which is what I consider to be the next major RTS, even though it probably won't come out for a long time, which is why I immediately disagreed with this title. But it probably won't come out for years. And there's definitely going to be RTS games since then, but sorry, carry on.
Unexpected is happening with the math here. That means that StarCraft 2's active player base is consistently and reliably over 2 million monthly active users.
That is assuming everyone only plays one ladder game a day, though. I don't know if this math works out like that. Anyways.
Million monthly active users.
The point is not so much that there's no players, though. There's plenty.
This is almost 12 years after the game's release and 2 years of being with bare minimum support. The reason that new RTSs are failing is not because of a lack of potential players. So the RTS audience exists, but who are they? This might come as a bit of
Boomers.
a surprise, but even a decade after StarCraft 2's release,
Boomers.
the large majority of players and viewers are casuals. In my survey data, over 3/4 of respondents self-identify as casual players, with under 20% being hardcore. This data lines up fairly well with a comment made by Matt Morris in an interview with Lowko back in 2016.
Like most people come into these games are, wings heart. They play the campaign. We see about 80% of the people that love the campaign, and only 20% stick around for the hardcore.
We're sitting really close together, by the way, guys. I'm just saying, okay, maybe it's because of the last couple of years, but like, he's basically sitting on my lap.
These are the really hardcore engaged competitive players.
Is that like 80 to 20?
Yeah, it drops like that. So, for a long time we've been saying, how do we help these people stick
Nice
around?
watch.
They obviously love the game.
While my question divides between
I gave that watch to my dad, actually. That is an Orient Mako, guys. Lowko, you looked paler back then? What do you mean? I looked well, this was in the summer. This was at Gamescom. When was this? 2017, 2018 or so? So this was at 2017. Okay. It's in the middle of summer. This was during Gamescom, which was so much fun, by the way. I really enjoyed these events. Blizzard stopped doing all of those as well, which, anyways.
Between hardcore and casual, while Matt Morris talks about co-op and campaign versus ranked multiplayer, there is a strong correlation between these groups. It's not bold to assume that the majority of self-described hardcore players focus on competition and esports, while casuals prefer everything else. Which brings us to error number 1 of most modern RTSs. Focusing on competitive ladder and esports. With game releases like Grey Goo and Age of Empires 4, the focus was entirely on multiplayer. The campaign was an obvious afterthought. The AI was garbage, and at times it verged on unplayable. But this is alienating 80% of your audience. In my polls, I asked how important it was for a game to have various aspects for people to give it a try. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 was not important at all, and 5 was essential. Here's the data for having a campaign, cooperative content ranked 1v1,
When deciding to play an RTS, how important is having a campaign, co-op, 1v1? All right, fair enough. I thought the poll was going to be like, would you rather have multiple options? Yes or no? Because I'm sure everyone would vote yes. I know that for StarCraft 2, from what I remember at the very least from information from back in the day, the vast majority of people never actually went past campaign. So when StarCraft 2 first came out, there was only campaign. And then there was 1v1, 2v2, and all that, right? Arcade mode didn't exist. Co-op didn't exist. So the vast majority of people that picked up Wings of Liberty, they may try one versus one game, but they pretty much all played campaign only and then went back to like whatever they were doing, right? So we come back to like that loyal customer base. I'm sure there were tons, like literally millions of people that were playing, for example, World of Warcraft, and they were like, hey, StarCraft 2 is coming out. I really like WoW, so this company seems cool. I'm going to go pick up this game, play the campaign, and then like 3 days later, they're like, okay. Well, actually, the campaign was quite long. So maybe like, 2 weeks later, they were like, okay, that was fun. Going to go back to what, like... And that's where, like, that's, I think, where a lot of RTS games miss the mark as well. They have a very hard time hooking people in. Like, hooking me into a 1v1 game is not very hard, but I'm not the average RTS player, right? Because just like Grant, I've been playing RTS games for as long as I can remember. We can talk about a lot of that as well, but let's see. Grant will probably get to this because there's a lot of things in this video.
And an active esports scene. It's pretty obvious that the development focusing on creating a ranked multiplayer environment and pro play is not going to draw in the numbers. To double check these numbers, I went hunting through Steam achievements on various RTS games to see how many people are touching the multiplayer. I was shocked to see how low some of these numbers were.
It's like 1 in 10
Iron
probably.
Harvest sits at 19.4%, and it's the highest of the bunch. Company of Heroes 2 is 14.2%, Grey Goo 4.7%, and Ashes of the Singularity a measly 1.8%. Though that last one is probably because everybody who boots that game has their GPU melt. Unfortunately, as far as I can tell, there's no achievement data for Age of Empires 4, but I would be surprised.
There's no ladder in Age of Empires 4, bro.
So if ranked multiplayer is not the most important thing to an RTS title for most players, why do developers keep focusing on it? It's pretty simple. Selection bias. Developers want to make the best product that they can, and very often bring on active and important members of RTS communities to help give those communities what they want. This is a great idea in theory. These people are very familiar with the scene in a way that developers can't be. But if you're a community member who makes their livelihood because of RTS, you aren't going to be a representative sample of the actual audience.
What?
Being a literal RTS professional, be it player or content creator, makes you the definition of hardcore. Yes, that absolutely.
I'm a casual,
me.
Grant.
Of course, the hardcore of the hardcore are going to focus on 1v1. Even when they look at people who they see as less hardcore in their communities, they're so firmly integrated to the competitive community that they only see people with the same interests. I'm not saying it's wrong to create a game that caters solely to hardcore players, but developers should know that they are actively alienating a large portion of potential players by doing so. A tacked on afterthought of a campaign isn't going to cut it. One more thing about audiences before we move on. There's a common misconception that the right RTS will grab all of the MOBA players and bring them back over from League or Dota. This idea stemmed from the fact that Defense of the Ancients started off as a custom game mode for Warcraft 3, and thus all early MOBA players were RTS players. But Warcraft 3 is almost 20 now. That doesn't apply to the modern MOBA player base. I polled about which genres RTS players tend to play, and MOBAs are behind RPGs, strategy games, FPSs, and sandbox games.
I don't think MOBAs go hand in hand with RTS games. Like, they're very different, you know? Like, a MOBA is closer to, like, for example, I think Dota 2 is closer to Overwatch than it is to StarCraft. Even though it may originate from, an RTS game, I don't think that really works like that. Like, I play StarCraft 2 like I'm playing a MOBA. Well, that's another reason why a lot of people do miss the mark, though, or why a lot of companies miss the mark. I think StarCraft 2 is also pretty bad at that. Like, whenever I coach people, I quite literally give the advice, especially when they're new to the game, to not look at the battles. It's like, just go home and make more stuff. It's way more important than actually keeping the stuff that you already have in the game. It's a bit counterintuitive in a lot of ways. But, yeah.
If you feel like you need to bring in a different audience, you're better off catering towards Halo, Skyrim, and Kerbal Space Program players. Before we move on to the main points, I'm going to switch to Opinion Grant for a moment and talk about stuff. Given the niche I fill on YouTube and Twitch, I interact with a larger variety of casual and newcomers to the RTS genre than almost anybody else on Earth. My focus on campaign-based content makes me a natural springboard for people looking to get into the game. From this unique position, I've heard a lot of opinions and preconceptions about RTS and its players from more or less outside sources. And I think many of these are fairly problematic. StarCraft players in particular love to talk about how freaking hard the game is. How a ladder match is like playing chess and piano at the same time. How it's the most competitive 1 versus 1 game.
Hell yeah, dude.
You physically can't click on the button to queue a Zerg unless your IQ is over 800. Basically, it's a lot of self-flattery, but it works. People see these views when they're looking into a game to play, and it's not a good thing. It makes people hesitant to try out the game.
He's not wrong. No, he's definitely right. There's a lot of people out there that play RTS games for 20 years or so. Some of them for longer than that, and they've been patting themselves on the back for a very long time. We've been like, oh my god, we're so good. Look at these MOBA nerds only able to micro 1 unit at once. I'm microing a whole army.
I'm not sure they want to spend the time it takes to learn when the community makes it seem like you need a PhD.
Why is there a
build
planetary fortress rush going on, by the way, in the background? Like, what's happening right now?
I think this is part of the reason that the casual to competitive conversion rate is so low. People are intimidated. My experience with both the StarCraft and Warcraft communities is that once you're inside, they're kind, supporting, and fairly non-toxic. But from an outside perspective, we look like a bunch of self-aggrandizing elitists.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So no wonder developers are trying to market towards that angle. I think it would be healthy to admit that while professional play is absolutely cutthroat, intense action all the way through, it's not that way for 99% of players. If most people knew most ladder games were more like 2 drunk toddlers fencing with pool noodles, the intimidation factor would be significantly lower.
Wait, his opponent was called Rainer? Alright, I'm pressing X for doubt on that one. Sure, I do agree that the vast majority of people are not interested in playing 1 versus 1. Over the years, I have also found, though, I've done polls of this even recently on the YouTube community tab on my own YouTube channel, asking how many people have played a ladder game. I think I asked, have you played a ladder game in StarCraft 2 in 2022 of 1 versus 1? And I don't remember exactly what the ratio was, but I think it was 90% said that they had not played a game. I am seeing roughly 3 million views in StarCraft 2 videos a month. I don't say that to flex, but I say that as an example that there are plenty of people that are interested in watching StarCraft 2 compared to playing StarCraft 2. I have had a consistent audience for literally years, and it honestly hasn't changed ever since like Blizzard. Like right now I'm seeing a bit of a dip in. Right now I'm seeing a bit of a dip in, but it's been consistently between 2.5 to like 4 million views every month for probably like 3, 4, 5 years, something like that. So I don't think not focusing on 1 versus 1 is a good idea.
Donation
But obviously
confirmed.
the things become quite complex if we're talking about RTS development at that point, because then you have to focus on all of the things. I do think there's like a ton of people, like StarCraft 2 in a lot of ways is a lot more reminiscent of like a conventional sport, in the sense that like there's a lot of people that, like, for example, I watched Formula 1 yesterday. There's absolutely zero chance that I'm going to be driving a Formula 1 car myself. And the same can be said for like football or basketball or anything along those lines. There's many people that watch the sport that have never, well, they maybe played it once upon a time back in the day, right? But many of them haven't played in literally decades. And I think StarCraft, especially StarCraft 1, but also StarCraft 2, is going in that same direction where there's like a lot of people have tried it once upon a time, and now they're like, okay, you know what? This game is fun. But also it's like having a second job, and I don't have the time or the stress levels to manage all of this, so I'm going to watch other people play instead. And that's probably the vast majority of you guys right now as well. I'm not like calling anyone out, but that is my experience, at least in StarCraft 2. It's a sport, yeah. On the flip side, if you compare that to like, I don't know, Fortnite esports, this is a big scene. I would probably wager that like 90% of the people that watch Fortnite esports also play Fortnite. Where StarCraft 2 is on the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Like, StarCraft 2 is almost like in like its own category. I personally, like, I watch some League of Legends whenever there's like the World's Finals going on, or the International in Dota 2, or like some CSGO from time to time. But I think most people that like watch the esports for those games also actually actively play those games. Like, StarCraft is in a pretty unique position. There's a lot of people, Lowko, we retired, we're all Twitch chat grandmasters now. Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that are interested in watching that aren't necessarily interested in playing. So I think not focusing on 1v1 or esports in general is also kind of dumb. But it is important to keep that in mind as well. I do think it's also possible to monetize an esport outside of actually playing the video game, but that's an entirely different category. Like, they don't necessarily have to just focus on, you know, if the goal for a company is to make money, which most of them have, I do think there's opportunity there as well.
So with all that out of the way, let's get to the core of this. What did old RTS have that was so successful that new RTSs are not doing?
There were no other games. There was nothing, okay? There was nothing. We just had RTS games, okay? What else did you have?
It's worth stating that this is not a blanket truth. Many RTS have released in the past that have crashed and burned in ways that make recent releases look successful. Instead, we're going to look at the common themes from the 3 biggest success stories. These being the Age of Empires and Mythology series, Command & Conquer, and the Blizzard RTSs. There are 3 pillars that these franchises had that allowed them to rise above and beyond and dominate the market for almost a decade. They are the engine, spectacle, and development tools. To introduce the first pillar, I want to talk about the 2020 release Iron Harvest. This game is awesome.
Yeah.
Post-World War I diesel...
Do you guys know I casted a tournament for Iron Harvest? When this game first came out, they reached out to me and asked if I wanted to cast a tournament. I casted the first tournament for this event. It was actually really fun. I actually really enjoyed it, but I haven't really heard much about the game.
X is an incredibly cool and unique setting. The units are stylized and varied, from tiny walkers with machine guns to enormous monsters with siege cannons. The visuals are pretty solid, the campaign voice acting is fun, and it's consistently supported with DLC content. It's really astonishing how uninterested I am at playing any more of it. The game fundamentally fails in its most basic aspects, pathfinding and responsiveness. When a group of units is told to go to one place...
Responsiveness, I already came back to this earlier, but like, responsiveness honestly is the biggest thing. This game like focuses on little squads of units, so like if you select one unit right there at the bottom, it selects a little group of them. And every time you move anything, it calculates movement, right? And it does things. And like, as a StarCraft player, this is confusing to me, because I would select one unit at the bottom and I would spam right click to like get things to move. And every time I would click, they would like kind of like derp around, because they would like recalculate their pathing every time. I also think actually that the graphics for this game, and this is something that I think Blizzard has once again nailed. StarCraft 2, despite coming out 12 years ago, and I do know that they made some graphical improvements over the years, but it still looks like a good game. It's very tricky to pinpoint exactly why that is. It's the same for like World of Warcraft Classic. World of Warcraft Classic looks good. I mean, obviously, you can pixel peep and you can notice that it's an old game, but like overall, the aesthetic is really nice. Whereas something like this, it ages very quick.
They'll split up and head a variety of different directions, making controlling even mid-sized armies a chore. Units are clunky, particularly large units take ages before they're able to execute commands, often creating frustrating situations where your most prized forces are sitting around like dunces while being killed. It relies heavily on a cover system for holding areas with infantry, but the outsides of most buildings can't actually be used for cover, with garrisoning being the only option. The enemy will select a unit of yours to kill, and if pulled back, the AI will charge their most expensive units through your entire army to reach it. I wanna like Iron Harvest, I really do, but I just can't. The game fundamentally feels bad to play. Many times when you lose, it's not because the enemy out-tacticked or overpowered you, it's because you're fighting a 2v1 against the opponent and the game's controls.
With Iron Harvest in particular, I do think they did a couple of things right. For example, you can notice that he's spending the entire time looking at the army. In StarCraft 2, oftentimes if like you hear your army is under attack, by the time that you look at it, the army's already gone. But you're also better off not actually paying attention to your army too much unless you're managing everything else simultaneously at home as well, right? That's one thing that are like, you know, people, especially on the lower ends of the ladder in StarCraft 2, they really get stuck at looking at the army while not producing anything at home. And Iron Harvest did a really good job at that. Like, there was some automated production, but they also, like, minimized the production tree in general. Anyways, let's go with the engine of StarCraft 1, I guess?
It's worth stating that some games in the past feel like that. StarCraft 1 doesn't feel good to play these days, but it was an upgrade from previous titles like Age of Empires, and then Age of Empires 2 was an upgrade from StarCraft. Red Alert was an upgrade from both, and that repeats over and over, each release being slightly better than the rest until StarCraft 2, where no other modern RTS has matched the pathing or the controls. RTS is a genre where you're going to have to spend significantly more time on the fundamentals. Gorgeous aesthetics mean nothing if the player is focusing all of their attention on trying to get the unit to move properly. Incredible sound design for attacks is worthless if units can't find their way to the battlefield. In games like shooters, the technical investment is far lower.
New
Engines come
subscriber
with pre-provided
detected.
tools,
Thank you,
and
Faraday.
developers have a firm understanding of the genre by now. But RTS needs a little bit more care under the hood. For all you executives and project managers out there, it might seem difficult to justify spending all the extra time and money on getting these fundamentals correct. But I promise you that by the end of this video, you will understand that this is not a barrier to entry for the genre, but instead an investment into saving more time, effort, and money down the line. One thing I find incredibly fascinating about the Big Three is they managed to span all of the main settings of gaming. Age of Empires was historical, Command & Conquer was modern fantasy, Warcraft was high fantasy, and StarCraft was sci-fi. Despite the settings being so wildly different, each of these games do a great job with the second pillar, spectacle. Spectacle doesn't need much explanation. Cool things are cool, and using cool things is fun. Age of Empires allowed players to recreate history in a way that was completely novel at the time. Age mythology brought literal deities into the mix, dropping meteors and thunderstorms on your opponent before moving in with an army of minotaurs and chimera. Command & Conquer started fairly average, but it dialed up to 11 with the Red Alert series. Weather control, Tesla coil troopers, zeppelins,
I thought General was
controlling
really cool.
enemies to run them into a grinder to harvest them for resources. It's crazy. Warcraft hit all the fantasy notes. Pillaging your foes with orcs, ambushing as elves, powerful heroes that shape the battles around them. A huge, diverse selection of third-party creeps that can be both fought for rewards and hired as mercenaries. And finally, StarCraft's far-future Protoss facing against the hillbilly Terrans with janky explosives. And of course, the Zerg rushes that are so iconic that
I think StarCraft 1 really nailed it in many ways. Like, for obvious reasons, the pathing in StarCraft 1, kind of bad, right? Like, if you've ever tried sending a Dragoon from one side of the map to the other side, you can oftentimes find it in the exact opposite corner of where you told it to go. Like, the pathing in StarCraft 1, unless you're watching, like, the top-tier pro players play, they make it look like the pathing is like it is in StarCraft 2, but it really isn't. Like, that unit composition and, like, moving around in that game is it's really rough. But I think, exactly, the game design in StarCraft 1 is absolute top-tier. Unit design is very clean. It's got, like, a certain crispness to it, you know, where, like, It's very bare bones. It's very basic in a lot of ways, but it feels really good. It's also very easy to understand. Like, you can look at it and understand what's going on. Whereas, like, if I personally watch a game of League of Legends, I have no clue what's happening. I just see lasers and sparks and all kinds of things. StarCraft 1 is maybe a little bit outdated at this point, but it's, you know, like StarCraft 1 is going to outlive StarCraft 2. There's pretty much no doubt about it. Like, StarCraft 1 is, like, StarCraft 2 is probably here to stay for at least a good amount of time. But StarCraft 1, especially in Korea, it's very popular. Like, StarCraft 1 is more popular in Korea than StarCraft 2 right now, apparently. Which is, yeah, pretty sweet. But yeah, I think StarCraft 1 actually did a lot of things very right.
They've become a basic part of gaming jargon. Spectacle is what you put on the box art, on the Steam page. It's what draws people in, and then starts to get them thinking. When things are crazy and wild, the player gets excited to find new interactions and combos. Ways to rush towards their favorite unit, ways to make it work even if it's a little bit underpowered. As the design focus has shifted towards multiplayer first, a lot of spectacle has been cut. Decimating armies with an invulnerable Soviet tank line with the Iron Curtain just isn't fair in multiplayer. You can't have Yuri mind control enemies and grind them up for cash, it's too cost efficient. When the design is for multiplayer first, you inevitably cut the things that should be selling your product. A good example of getting this balance right is StarCraft 2.
So we had all these ideas
New subscriber detected.
StarCraft 2 that we thought were pretty cool.
Thank you, Eskel.
We had units like the Diamondback, which is this tank that can move and shoot at the same time. Well, it turned out it stepped a lot on the Marauder.
Yeah. So StarCraft 2 did this really cleverly where you got way more units in the campaign than you actually do in multiplayer. Like a Diamondback or like one of those Banelings that splits up into other Banelings from the Heart of the Swarm campaign. That would be stupid in multiplayer, right? Like Zerglings that can jump up and down cliffs. That, I mean, you know, I would like to see it on the ladder for a couple days, see how it goes. But within a few days, the entire ladder is going to be Zerg, right? Yeah, StarCraft 2 did that very well.
Stepped even a little bit on the siege tank in terms of its role. These units were too similar, and it wasn't actually that easy to control. It was actually very difficult to manage what this thing...
Those vile roaches, the ones that when like you attack something, they reduce attack speed on a unit that's affected by it.
...was shooting at while you're moving it. This guy wasn't for esports. We had a Spectre. It's a new type of ghost. This guy's going to be cool. Oh, okay, well now we got two ghosts. You're going to pick one. You're not going to use the other one. And we didn't really want to cut the ghost. It seemed kind of core to what StarCraft was all about. So not for esports, the poor Spectre. But these are all cool. These are all...
I think Dustin Browder, by the way, I think he's at that new studio that Mike Morheim started. I'm forgetting the name of it right now. Dreamhaven? Is it Dreamhaven? Dreamhaven. Yeah. I'm fairly certain that's where he went. I don't know, like they haven't announced what games they're working on. Yeah, he basically has produced all your favorite RTS games.
Units that
or at least, you know, obviously it's not a one-man project, but he's been part of all the big ones.
I've ever worked on, I absolutely would have put in. But since those other games weren't designed to be an esport, they made no sense for StarCraft. But we wanted them in the game. We felt like we've done the art. They're fun units to play with. Why should the consumer not have the opportunity to play with these? And so we tried to find places we could put these.
Though I would argue that they didn't go far enough. Originally, the Thor was going to be a unit so massive that it had to be built by SCVs on the field.
I love that idea.
Battlecruisers were going to have custom weapon attachments like plasma torpedoes that had to be individually upgraded. The mothership could stop time, crack planets, and create insta-kill black holes. The fact that we never got to play with these is honestly disappointing. I'm not saying that competitive multiplayer should be filled to the brim with broken game-ending superweapons, but I feel like each faction should be designed with absurdity in mind. Make it ridiculous for the single-player experience, and then trim it down to what's fair for multiplayer.
Yeah, that's
Boring,
the obvious approach.
uninspired units and abilities
100%.
are all too common in recent RTS. Cool stuff sells. At this point, you have a game with a strong fundamental base. You've designed bombastic, over-the-top units to energize and inspire...
For what it's worth, by the way, they did shift a bunch of that power away. Like, when StarCraft 2 first released, I'm thinking about, like, especially Black Hole for the mothership. Remember that? That was stupid in multiplayer. So for those of you unfamiliar, the mothership had an ability called Black Hole, which in theory is really cool. So basically what you can do is you throw this thing out on the map, and units that are, like, in its radius slowly get sucked towards the center. MVP versus Squirtle, yeah. There have been some games historically in StarCraft 2, so I think they removed this after like 2 years or so of the game. I'm not exactly sure. Anyways, it didn't take too long for Protoss players to figure out that, wait a second, Archon, like, they deal a lot of damage as far as splash damage goes. However, oftentimes units aren't stacked up enough, right? So we see this every once in a while right now in StarCraft 2 that the Archon could, like, you know, it can deal damage, say, for example, to like a clumped up group of Mutalisks or something, right? And that's an obvious misplay. However, Protoss players figured out that you could literally, like, flush your own Archons into the, you know, what people call the Archon toilet, into the vortex, and units would be invulnerable for a little while, but then at some point the vortex would run out, and the Archons would literally destroy everything. Like, Protoss players did the math. They were like, okay, if I'm sucking up, like, I don't know, like a bunch of Brute Lords, I need like 6 Archons in there. But if it's like Battle Cruisers, I need 8 of them in there. And they're like, you know, got the perfect amount of Archons into the Archon toilet. The reason why that's bad, even though it sounds really fun while I'm describing it, is that you had these like really overpowered game-ending moves. And while it might be okay and fun to watch, it is extremely brutal and far too much for multiplayer. But yeah, I think in a campaign, I mean, go nuts. Do whatever you need.
The player base, but you don't get to make a game just yet. Now is the time to put effort into making a great editor. Not just a good editor, a great editor. This is the final pillar of successful RTS. The terrain, mission scripting, triggers, cutscenes, and even the AI should all be created inside of the modules of this editor. It is the Swiss Army knife that creates every piece of the game that the player interacts with. We all know the gaming scene has changed in the last 20 years. You can no longer get away with launching a product, a year later popping out an expansion, and calling it a day. Games as a service is the new normal. The new goal is the constant progressive creation and distribution of content in a game so that the players will continue to stick around. A powerful editor allows developers to create that content at a rapid pace.
Nice frame rate.
Take Age of Empires 2 for instance. The game initially launched with 5 campaigns, and as time went on, due to having a well-designed editor, campaigns have continued to be made and sold. As of writing this, the game has a staggering 33 available campaigns with almost 250 missions. This is an incredible amount of content to be pushing out. A constant way to reliably
Most of them are boring as hell, though.
The ecosystem, getting them
I've played a
hyped
whole
for
lot
the
of them.
content release. A powerful editor also gives the flexibility to capitalize on things that have accidentally become successful. StarCraft.
Yeah, no, I do agree that an editor is very important. Like, for example, the reason why StarCraft 2 is still being played right now, I think a lot of people are immediately thinking of arcade games, but I think map creators are some of the unsung heroes of the StarCraft community. Like, if Blizzard was still in charge of maps, we'd be playing on some, like... If you look back at the map pool of Wings of Liberty in the early days, it's really no good, man. Yeah, you can... Like, the StarCraft 2 editor is extremely powerful. You can make, like, your own entire campaign. You can do whatever you like. Like, I don't know if they produced the entire Legacy of the Void campaign and Heart of the Swarm and stuff and Wings of Liberty just from the editor itself. Maybe they had some sort of internal version, but you could essentially do that, which, you know, allows the community to get into the mix, which is awesome. It also makes it that it's relatively easy to make adjustments. So I'm fairly certain that the people that are in charge of StarCraft 2 these days were definitely not in charge of the development of any of those major products. And they can probably just adjust some of the... Like, say you want to create your own version of StarCraft 2 where the Corruptor deals twice as much damage. You can go into the editor and just adjust the value ×2 and, you know, save it and play. I'm fairly certain they use the editor for a lot of the development of the game as well, yeah.
StarCraft 2's co-op commander system was initially a tiny side project when it debuted in 2015. It was considered less important than Legacy of the Void's campaign, the mission packs, and of course the star of the show according to Blizzard, Archon mode. Well, it turned out Archon mode sucked and was a complete failure, but co-op was incredibly successful, and Blizzard was able to rapidly expand on it, turning it from a selection of 6 heroes to the current 18, as well as adding in a mutator and prestige system for massive levels of replayability off of a very small development team. If the editor they were working with was not as robust, flexible, and easy to use, that opportunity would have left them by the wayside. But now I have to admit, I've been a bit misleading so far. I said that these 3 pillars provided the support that old school RTSs had that led them to greatness, and that modern releases failed because they didn't have them. But that's not exactly it. These pillars serve as the catalyst for the true reason. What is the most powerful force in all of gaming? The critical core of the genre that has been lost and must return for a successful game. Of course, I'm talking about player-generated content.
Oh, okay. Well, I was already talking about that.
ModDB is a website for modding games, with a focus on older titles. It's not as big as places like the Steam Workshop or Nexus Mods, but it's been around for a while. Slightly more recent games like Minecraft have 2 million mod downloads there, while some of the bigger titles from the old days like Half-Life and GTA San Andreas have almost 9 million mod downloads. That is a lot, but it's also unsurprising. GTA and Half-Life are not just big brands, they're cultural juggernauts in gaming. What is surprising is that both of these are dwarfed by Medieval 2 Total War's 11 million downloads and Command & Conquer General's 13 million. But why? These are both good games, but neither are iconic pieces of gaming history.
Hello, I love
RTS
generals.
is specifically well suited towards user-made content. The top-down perspective is significantly less restrictive on creative freedom than the first or third-person cameras. An RTS with a good editor serves as a blank canvas for an inspired creator to build what they want. And while the average creation might be pretty mundane, there have been multiple instances where entire genres have been spawned from these editors, like tower defense and MOBAs. The reason that the focus on custom content was dropped was largely due to emulation. Developers saw that StarCraft 2 launched with a pretty terrible custom games section and determined it wasn't.
This is a screenshot of what StarCraft 2 used to look like. I think the guys in charge of Xbox or something designed this UI. Like, there was some weird stuff, man. Like, the problem with releasing a half-done game, and StarCraft 2 was really well polished for, like, 2022 standard at the very least. But one of the issues with launching a half-finished game is that a lot of people will simply not come back. So, for example, Age of Empires 4 at this point does still not have a ladder. There's no ladder in in Age of Empires 4. Supposedly it's coming out this year, but like I think it's already too late. The issue is that like I would have probably kept playing it too. Like I'm probably part of that issue as well. Like I'm probably gonna come back at least at some point if they decide to introduce it. But the vast majority of people have already moved on to something else, right? Like if they release it right now, the only people that are gonna play on it are the people that are playing right now. Yeah, there's no patrol moving in AoE 4, but that's like, I picked that as an example just because it's the most recent major RTS release. It's got a couple of things that I think could have been improved on, but it just is a shame that a lot of games, and StarCraft 2 on release was also definitely not as good as it is right now, just don't have everything finished. Like, there's a lot of, I understand that it's a massive undertaking, and like, I know that you have to release a project because of, you know, investors and all that and blah, blah, blah. But I think if you're going to make a new RTS game, you probably want to have continuous development of it while simultaneously also releasing a finished product. Yeah, a lot of things were missing though. Like, for example, things like clan support and having chat channels. Like StarCraft 2 when it first came out felt like a very lonely game. Most people would just kind of stick to single player and never move on because there was absolutely no incentive for them to do so. Like, still right now in StarCraft 2, pretty much all of the community interaction happens outside of the game. Right? Like, do any of you log into StarCraft 2 to talk to your friends? Like, nobody does that. I remember doing that, for example, in World of Warcraft. I would literally just sit in Ironforge, just talking to people in guild chat. That is not a thing you do in StarCraft 2. You hang out in NA general chat? All right, then. You're one of those guys, huh? Anyways. No, but, like, there's some huge missed opportunities, man. And, like, the StarCraft 2 arcade is definitely a good example. Like, they clearly had more intention of it, right? Like, they created, like, the premium arcade, where they put, like, Direct Strike Premium and a bunch of... Like, there's monetization you can make over there as well, man. There's a lot of things you can add to the game, and, like, a lot of things that probably should have been there. Obviously, there's only so much you can expect from a game release, but I do think it's going to be very difficult to release a good RTS game.
An important part of their own RTS.
It's because there's so much.
But this wasn't an intentional act by Blizzard. It was the arcade not being ready in time.
Yeah.
I would argue that the 2 years it took for a good system to play user-generated content with people was StarCraft's greatest flaw, and that copycats are not following success, but have instead been repeating a mistake. In the early 2000s, RTS had a dominant position on the player-generated content scene. In 2010...
For example, okay, so I know I'm pausing every 5 seconds, but I remember many days before Warcraft 3 came out that we used to do LAN parties in high school and we would just play Warcraft 3 Arcade. Like, I have played more Warcraft 3 Arcade than I've done Warcraft 3 1v1. Not until I started playing StarCraft 2 did I start playing Warcraft 3 1v1 as well. I have played tons of tower defense. Yeah, we used to play the original Dota. There's a lot of people that are really good at making games that will like they will do so for literally free. Like the people that made those Warcraft 3 custom games, they didn't get any money out of it other than like Ice Frog and maybe a bunch of guys that made Dota, right? But the vast majority would be nice if you could monetize it, but people are ready to do free work if you give them the tools.
The launch of StarCraft 2, that dried up. It's not like that creativity and passion to build has disappeared. It just went somewhere else. Because 1 year
Donation
later,
confirmed.
in 2011, Minecraft launched.
Thank you,
And
Gino.
if you ask anybody age 12 to 22, they can firmly tell you that while Minecraft was fun on its own, the best part was the mods. There was an absurd selection of unique
There still
game
is,
modes
dude.
that captivated not just audiences, but also
Minecraft is
viewers,
super popular.
launching countless careers of Minecraft YouTubers who explored, highlighted, and played through these. The players were given a powerful...
Mr. Beast, most subscribed Minecraft YouTuber. That's kind of mean, bro.
New
Putting Mr.
subscriber
Beast and
detected.
PewDiePie under the Minecraft YouTuber
Exclamation
section? Anyways.
mark.
Thank you, Deckard. Appreciate you.
Minecraft YouTubers who explored, highlighted, and played through these. The players were given a powerful tool to create and proceeded to do not only that, but also organically market those creations to both each other as well as the wider world with minimal developer input. This has proven to work not only in Minecraft but in other games as well. Skyrim is famous for its insane levels of playability, and it just
Hell
so
yeah,
happens to
dude.
be the best-selling RPG ever. if
Dumb as
you
the
don't
train.
count Pokemon.
Watch
The
out.
best-selling Halo game is Halo 3.
That's a
which
mod, by the way, where you can replace every dragon in Skyrim with Thomas the Train. And he does the little boop, boop as well when he comes in, rather than a roar.
New subscriber
It's-
detected.
It's really good. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there that have just been modding Skyrim. Like, the reason why Skyrim is still around today is because people are modding it. Lowko, that's not a mod? All right, then.
just so happened to be the one that includes the Forge, which was by far the best way to create and share custom games in a shooter at the time. Kerbal Space Program spent the majority of its life as a bare-bones spaceship simulator brought to life by the easy-to-use CCAN mod manager. And don't even get me started about Half-Life mods, where people created niche modes like Counter-Strike and whatever the heck Gary's mod is. And despite all of these high-profile hits and Minecraft being the best-selling game of all time, none of them are the most successful game to follow this formula. Roblox is. I'm going to put aside the questionable ethics of the Roblox Corporation right now. People Make Games already did a great video on that topic. And instead, just focus on the numbers. Roblox is only a platform for users to create games, share them, and play each other's creations. Roblox has 200 million monthly active users. At the time,
It's all kids, though. Like, they watch so many ads. I've seen my nieces and nephews play Roblox. I quite literally just see them sitting there watching ads the entire time. And every once in a while, they get to play. It's
fighting this, Roblox has the same number of players as the top 3 Steam games
It works. It
combined.
works.
This formula of making a solid basis for players to create custom content works. It was proven with Battle.net in StarCraft 1. It was reaffirmed with the custom games section of Warcraft 3. It was driven to ridiculous proportions with Minecraft.
So, Warcraft 3 kind of lucked out in that department, though. Like, they made the editor available, and then, like, you know, people created content around it. Like, in 2022, the entire, you know, industry has changed, right? Like, I have been promoting something like StarCraft 2 for a very long time, and there's so many YouTubers and Twitch streamers out there that are more than happy to promote your game just by playing.
And then Roblox came and drove the point home. RTS is a great platform for making this content. This content is immensely popular. The RTS player base skews towards older gamers.
Boomers! There we are! There we are, boys! Ooh. Dude, my analytics are even more skewed towards a higher age. It used to be 18 to 24. Right now, it's 25 to 34 as the biggest category. But there's a lot of people in the age group of 35 to 44 as well. Like, I would say 98% of my audience are men between 18 and 44 years old. Yeah.
And right now, there's a large
That's
number
me,
of
Lowko?
now
No.
older gamers who grew up with Minecraft. The math makes sense.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire history of RTS, the common theme between the dominant titles has been creator agency. There's a fundamental limit to what a development team can do for a game. They can only make so much content, and after release, they're stuck in maintenance mode, running around putting out fires and squashing bugs instead of developing new content. When the community is empowered, the creation process can continue. When things are created and
Okay.
promoted, they draw in more players. And when more players are drawn in, some of them will become creators.
The real skill,
this is
Void
the
Ray.
feedback loop that is key for creating a successful title. When you log into an RTS that's destined to fail, you log into a campaign and a 1v1 ladder. But for the kings of the genre, it's not just these things. It's a MOBA, a unit spawner, a tower defense, a hero arena, a Sims game. It's a cat and mouse, Mario Party, and Risk. It's even this weird Toho anime thing that I absolutely know nothing about, but if I did, Marisa would be best girl, don't at me. It's an auto battler, a card game, a tug of war. It's Mafia, Bejeweled, and a typing game. It's a freaking MMO shooter. It's a way to be competitive and a way to play with your friends. None of these things were made by the developers, but all of them were made possible because of the developer. The reason that the next RTS will fail is a fundamental misunderstanding of what the S in RTS stands for. The first developer who understands that the S is not strategy, but instead stands for sandbox, will be the new king of the playground.
All right, that was very
Thanks for
dramatic.
watching.
That was a very dramatic ending. The S, chat, the letter S. I think overall Grant is right with a lot of things here, yeah. I do think that there are RTS studios out there, or gaming studios out there, that can produce popular RTS game. Relic obviously is making a couple of them, and honestly, in my opinion, whenever people ask me, like, what do you think is, like, the big RTS that's coming out in the future? The main one that I think of is Frost Giants. They haven't announced their game yet, and there's no release date or anything like that, but when it comes to people that can build an RTS, I think it's probably them. I hope so anyways. Like, I feel like if someone is going to be able to take over the leads for an RTS game, it's probably them. Basically all the old StarCraft guys and like Warcraft and a bunch of Call of Duty guys, or Call of Duty, Command & Conquer guys, have moved on over to a new company, and they're making a new RTS game. So I feel like they probably have the best like view on what would make a successful RTS game. And I'm hoping they will be able to succeed in that department. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of obvious misses, right? Like, your games should feel good to play. I think Immortal Gates of Pyre looks pretty good as well. I personally haven't played it yet. I hope that one will also be pretty good. Yeah, I heard that it feels a bit funny to play, but I personally haven't tried it out yet. I know it's not out, so I haven't. But yeah, I am playing basically every single RTS that releases. And so far, over the last decade, I've tried pretty much all of them. And none of them has felt as good as StarCraft 2. And for me personally, a lot of it comes down to just the way that units maneuver and the way that the games feel. I know that's kind of difficult to describe. It's kind of like, Lowko, what is love? What does make a good RTS game? I think just having good unit reactiveness goes a very long way. And honestly, that is where most RTS games really miss. But I also do think, though, it's really critical to have an esports scene, right? So, like, I think you should probably view the esports scene as, like, a marketing expense. So, like, you can run most of the esports scene. You can let most of the esports scene be run by the community. But a lot of the monetization will probably have to come from the company that's putting out the esports scene. Because there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of people interested in watching StarCraft 2 that wouldn't, if the audience is men between 18 and 44, there's plenty of guys out there that can spend a little bit of money on the game. It's not, that they don't want to spend money, but currently there's no way as a spectator to StarCraft 2 to really spend any of your money other than, like, by subscribing to Twitch live streams. Thank you guys, by the way. Or, like, buying merchandise or whatever. But in general, I do think there's a lot of missed opportunities there. Anyways, I'm sure there's a lot of people, like, I don't really know exactly how Dota does it, for example, but whenever the international's going on, there's always a ton of hype and a ton of marketing happening at the same time, right? Like, the players in the game will literally buy whatever it's called in Dota. I'm forgetting the name right now, but, like, a ton of the money that's needed to run that esports scene is generated by players, because every year they're trying to, like, the Battle Pass, is that what it's called? The Compendium, that's what I was thinking of. Yeah. But a ton of the money that they need to run that esports scene is generated by the community themselves. So, it's Compendium or Battle Pass. It's the same. All right. Anyways, there's a lot of potential there. But yeah, there's no denying that StarCraft 2 currently is not really getting a whole lot of love. And that there is definitely an opportunity for a new company to swoop in and take a lot of that market. But currently, there's nothing that's been released that will be, or that has been as good as StarCraft 2 is right now. So we'll see if the next major RTS will fail. I feel like that's a bit of a dramatic title, but then again, I have done my fair share of, I don't want to call it clickbaiting, But yeah, this is definitely a way to get people to click on your video. No, I don't think this is clickbait. I think this would be considered like legit bait or something along those lines. I have never titled a video best game of the year. What do you mean, dude? No, this video is doing really well. I think Rand is making some great points. Make sure to check out his videos, by the way. He makes a lot of awesome stuff. I might want to do some of those custom campaigns myself. Would you guys be interested in watching that? He's done some crazy challenges in the StarCraft campaigns. I was thinking about doing some of them myself as well. Oh, okay. There's a lot of people interested in that. All right. We should play 3-player StarCraft 2 campaign. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of options, man. There's a lot. Nightmare difficulty sounds pretty fun. I like that if you hover over it, you see my face. What is this? Am I part of the clickbait? Why am I there?